often has a tough time dealing with that. So just having a 3-mana weapon that can impact the board immediately is sometimes quite relevant.
Yeah, Leta looked like he was getting ready to go for some long-distance Hearthstone playing from across the room, but thought better of it as he just shuffles his chair into position. But already RDU just slams the mulligan within seconds and just finds that Incantus flow straight away. So we've already got a pretty explosive game on our hands, at least from one player's side, whereas Leta really needs these early minions to have some impact, because otherwise he is just waiting for till turn 5 for something significant to do, at least initially.
Okay, now this is a hand I'm very interested in, because this is a hand now that can potentially go Runed Orb onto, coin Lunacy into flow, right? There's no real mana consideration for using the Incantus flow onto, but RDU, remember, is a player that has only very recently put Deck of Lunacy back in his deck, so he is clearly much more used to going with the burn plan when it comes to mage matchups. But I would also argue that, you know, Libram Paladin, Libram of Hope Paladin in particular, is one of the toughest decks to go straight burn plan against.
Yeah, it's also tough as well because there's the slight consideration of just having Incantus flow with card draw, especially now with Refreshing Spring Water. But again, because of the curve you outlined, the card draw's just as good when you draw in the nuttier cards, right, from Deck of Lunacy. So I do like the approach he's taken here. I think very clearly going with that coin Lunacy plan.
Yeah, looks like it now. This is certainly the way I saw it panning out based on that Lunacy draw a couple of turns ago. Now Leta is going to have the tough opportunity to put on pressure. And I do like this because, again, very, very early in this metagame, before Deck of Lunacy was nerfed, when it was a 2-mana card and it was just straight up running the metagame, I was playing a lot of Secret Libram Paladin around that time, and found that I would extremely consistently win the matchups where they did not draw Lunacy, and extremely consistently lose the matchups where they did draw Lunacy. So I think personally, if given the opportunity, even with it costing 4, I would rather play the Lunacy deck versus Paladin than the straight up burn deck.
Hey, now though, Leta's pretty much just looking for Hand of a Doll, I think, from this Night of Anointment. Does get it. Gonna be able to just beef up the board just a little bit, and now he's got to turn 5. These are where things are going to start kicking off, I think, well, I guess for both players at this point. So now it's just a ton of damage. Aldor Truthseeker, he can weave in the Libram of Judgment whenever he desires, whether that's Aldor Judgment or Aldor Judgment Aldor.
We're back.
Or Judgment Aldor.
We're back to freeze, burn, burn, freeze, freeze, burn. He has to say. I like the Divine Shield, yeah. The Libram of Wisdom is a little bit sketchy, just because you want to kind of speculate as to what these last few cards in the opponent's hand are that could be mage spells before they come down.
Yeah. You are losing it today.
Why?
But you just said I kind of like the Divine Shield.
Oh, I meant spell. I didn't mean. I meant spell damage. I just said the wrong thing. I wasn't expecting a Divine Shield to appear, if that makes a difference.
Yeah. Spendable performance, though. He's going to pile on a good amount of pressure here to go up against Leta. And obviously a board of 1/1s doesn't sound like a lot, but already these can just kill the Truthseeker. And RDU has a 5 mana to play with next turn on top of it, right? I'm going to throw the book. I do think Leta has to go for it. He gains a lot of benefit here. Might be time to drop that Libram, yeah, just because of the fact that his minion does just die on board, if not.
Yeah. Alright, it's a whiff. Imagine we'll be seeing the Incantus flow come down here. RDU can just potentially go digging on the following turn now for some very deeply discounted power cards.
Now Leta can just go Truthseeker, Libram of Judgment this turn. Which, considering it's turn 6, is pretty powerful. But does that change the equation? I think it probably does, right?
This is not what we stood for.
Get the secrets out. Start not only effectively drawing cards from the deck for Leta, but also making RDU to just think about his turns that little bit more to try and play around some of these secrets.
Right. Zero Mana Rally, definitely a perfect way off the top to be dealing with the Oh My Yor, the potential of Oh My Yor. A bit rough to get the backstab there and lose your own minion as well. It's one of the weaker outcomes. And currently rolling quite poorly on these 8-mana spells, which generally do have some of the weakest outcomes in the game. They kind of veer very rapidly from extremely good to just outright useless. Hitting double Guardian Animals is obviously kind of a disaster, but now having picked up the Grand Slam, all things are looking rosy for RDE.
I do think he should use Siphon Soul this turn, although it means that he doesn't get to ping. I think having the 0-mana Malevolent Strike will be more important later, right?
I generally would agree with that, yeah.
He still gains the health from Siphon, so it's the gain still exists. It's not like he's on 13, which then we could talk more about it, but I don't think the ping is really worth it here.
Must be a way.
Yeah, I agree. It's very difficult to calculate, obviously, because you're like, well, you know, what would I ever want to spend this 1 mana on? You have no idea. It could be anything from the top of your deck, right?
Yeah. Definitely the approach I would take.
Neither in the end, to just hold on to all of the above, which could end up being potentially a little bit dangerous here with the amount of damage he can be facing down, adding in this 4 attack from the Talon, and then giving the Libram of Judgment to come in behind that as well. He could start to just fret about his health total a little bit, but I understand that he might not have just wanted to kill the Talon that turn because, you know, arguably he would just be giving his opponent a play potentially when they might not have one in hand that would be powerful.
And also as well, his Grand Slam, say there wasn't really a big follow-up, his Grand Slam could just kill this off and he still gets to retain 2 ways to kill 2 Libram of Hopes for more or less free.
Important thing that needs to be considered there that you are seeing with the way that RDU played this turn is that he really wanted to preserve spells to check again on the following turn after the next weapon swing came down, right? As to be able to bust the second Oh My Yogg potentially and then still be able to play Grand Slam on the same turn, which I think is one of the reasons, again, he was so eager to hold on to as many cheap spells as possible in the previous turn. Start to see what I was talking about earlier though, right? Like, this is such a powerful Libram Paladin draw. It's been borderline perfect so far in everything that Leta has done. But RDU just does not seem short of ways to deal with this situation.
Right. I guess
a little bit ridiculous in terms of spot removal though. Yeah,
but that's also, if you want to flip it around, one of the weird problems that RDU also has. He can remove all these minions, but Leta's not being pressured, which means he can just greed out this Liadrin quite a lot and then just gain all these Librams back again, which pretty much cost nothing at this point because he's played the reductions.
He's kind of being pressured, right? If you go Siphon, Malevolent, Mask, push 6, your opponent's at 11, you have 6 in play, and you have a Fireball in hand. Obviously, there's the Lifesteal Libram that you have to account for on the other side, but I still think that's a pretty significant amount of pressure.
Well, yeah, he's going to get the 3/4 though, right? That is the secret, isn't it? So that will at least stunt some of it.
Yeah. The other factor, of course, is that the Librams from Liadrin are so cheap that they can basically come down in the same turn at this point anyway. Though some of those discounts did come from Carriol.
Oh, a part of me wants to see Northwatch Commander here for the draw, but Leta might just have to. I think he even goes like Hero Power Wisdom. And then Liadrin, right? Because he's not played that many Librams of Wisdom this game.
Reporting for duty.
Yeah, I like this. Just use the safest turn you can find to do this. He can kill off the 3/5. And still feel, I think, a reasonably confident health total. And he also knows now there's only 1 natural mage card left in the hand for RDU, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Act now.
And also, I think it's fair to say that that card isn't devolving missiles because there was a Talon just sitting on the board for multiple turns.
I completely agree with that, yes. I was about to lead to the same point.
I like stacking the Librams then.
Yep. Of course, as I mentioned before, the optimal thing to do is just to leave an arbitrary number of them in your hand, because it just looks like you have a really specific plan and makes you look smarter. That's the Fury Hunter tech for those of you out there who are wondering.
Well, interestingly enough, now RDU could like play Guardian Animals and then Soul Mirror and gain a good chunk of Librams himself. Not saying he should, but he could.
Wait, what's the Guardian Animals for?
Does he know this isn't...
It's the same secret from...
Oh, sorry.
Right?
Yeah, one didn't get played, sorry. I stared at the Oh My Yogg in his hand and didn't look at it for the rest of the turn and just assumed it was Oh My Yogg. Yeah, he doesn't need to do that, of course.
Yeah. That's actually quite an awkward card to draw this turn. You'd have to like Hero Power or play the Northwatch first and then dump some Librams onto it if you wanted to open the first day this turn.
What would Uther do?
I think that's okay though. I think the Northwatch, just cycle it, seems pretty good to me.
Yeah, I like it too.
Back these brutes.
Weirdly enough, RDU's hand is now currently gagging for Leta to actually play second Oh My Yogg, just so he can just rip Guardian Animals out of his hand and actually get it to potentially do something.
It's one of the reasons I was genuinely suggesting the Soul Mirror, because he would have retained the Liadrin, which then he could have stacked the Librams he got from the 5/5 onto the Liadrin and still kill off Leta's Liadrin too.
Yeah, remember their full cost when they go over to his side, though, so they're nowhere near as efficient as they would be. But you could get a
He would have had 7 mana, right?
Well. Yeah. You can get some down after the Soul Mirror for sure.
Yeah.
Running out of value now is RDU.
Again, does this... I'm going to keep suggesting Soul Mirror until he plays it, but can RDU really just kill 2 things and kind of pass again? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think this one does have to be the Soul Mirror turn, and he can go Malevolent Strike and Ping to clear up the remaining 8/8 and the 6/1. Which still only involves playing 2 cards, still continues to play around Horse Secret, Horseman Uther.
I'm going to overdraw. Now that Blade Master doesn't look too bad, does it? Exactly what Leta needed.
Yep. Wasn't really sure where this hand was going, but that draw just really tied it all together.
May the light grant you peace.
Okay, that Libra of Hope no longer there because he did just draw it, but just give us a quick glance at what's left. So honestly, just not a lot in terms of actual just singular power cards, right?
Yeah, there's not much gas, has to be said. Like, one of these last 2 boards or so are going to have to stick. Obviously, there is still this like pretty infinite Libram of Wisdom chain at this point, because RDU would have to find like a Hex, right, to be able to deny them, because all the natural mage cards are gone, and you can't get Devolving Missiles out of a deck of Lunacy deck, so RDU would need to pick up some other transform effect to be able to deny the Libram of Wisdom chain. I think, yeah, Leta quite wisely spacing them out a little bit, even though he needs a bunch of them to come down on the Blade Master. He doesn't need all of them. He doesn't need all of them to come down on the Blade Master. So he does space them out just a little bit to play around some of those spot removals.
And RDU probably loves the fact that Oh My Yog has been played. He can finally use this Guardian Animals.
I mean, it's very good for Leta as well, because Leta's hand's kind of gassed out as well at this point.
Kind of, but
yeah, I mean, from RDU's perspective, obviously. Yeah.
I was going to say, Libram of Hope's pretty good, Sol. I don't know if you played that card before, but it's pretty sweet.
Guardian Animals goes to... Oh, the nuts! The absolute nuts.
Yeah, he did only hit the 4-1, though.
Yeah, sorry, he just Oh My Yogged into the best possible 5-mana spell and hit the best possible 5-mana minion in the game. But he did only hit the 4-1. You're right, Raven.
Bright side, Sol. Bright side.
Alright, he drew at least 2. He drew exactly 2 of those Libram of Wisdoms back, I think, because they were still lit up in the hand after the glide. There's a Nourish, though. Still a ton of things are available to be done this turn. RDU needs to get motoring. Ugh.
Have it back. Guardian Animals. Full cost.
Yeah, just the Hellfire. Pretty good, though. Cleans up, redominates the board with the 5-8. Gets himself in control.
Yep, Leta does have Libram of Justice with Penflinger this turn, though, so this 5-8, although it looks scary, is just deleted. Does mean, though, he won't be able to swing with the 5-attack weapon, which is... Oh, when your opponent's on 9, it's going to feel bad.
Yeah. And the way RDU ended up mapping out the turn also ended up being really important, because obviously he went with his board clear first, he forced all the Librams back into hand, and then he shuffled them in the deck, which you know, buffers Leta from fatigue a little bit, but most importantly, it means that Leta can't just make a 10-10 every single turn, right, with that huge stack of Librams that he would have in his hand otherwise. Something that's very nicely navigated from RDU. Nearly got caught out by the rope at the end, but I think still in the end was able to execute the turn very nicely.
Reporting for duty. I must act now.
She's going to save the Libram of Justice and use the weapon swing to actually get through this minion instead, by the looks of things.
Yeah, I think Leta now is almost readjusting to the idea that he might be able to fatigue RDU in this position, like kind of take advantage of the spot that he's been put in. With those Librams going back into the deck. It's going to be difficult, of course, because now he's going to top deck some of those Librams, and that's going to be his turn. Oh! That's going to make life very, very difficult.
Insane.
If RDU is going to be picking up Nag Grand Slam. Yeah, I think any chance of getting on the fatigue plan involved that second Nag Grand Slam being a survival of the fittest instead of a Nag Grand Slam, because it's going to be tough, I imagine, to be able to deal with that. But he does now have the Libram of Hope Penflinger combination to be able to answer this position. Ah, never mind.
No, it's not.
Dead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's just lethal, and the second Nag Grand Slam was just about enough. But what a strange game, Sottle. Like, that looked like it was under control for Leta, especially after RDU getting just so many defensive tools and the double Guardian Animals in hand pretty early. But he just about pulled it out of the bag there, but with a lot of thanks going over to Nag Grand Slam number 2.
Yes, but I do want to shout out in particular that glide turn that he played the turn before, which I think was very, very nicely done, and putting everything together. Even going back a couple of turns before that, where he like greeted out the Soul Mirror for a couple of turns until he really hit that board that he couldn't interact with, but then following that up with the glide turn, very nicely done indeed. And then Leta, I do think had the right idea of how to adjust from that point, because if he'd have just used up that board, that hand that he had, right, gone Libram of Hope, dealt with the 1 minion, like I said, he's going to be top decking Libram of Wisdom from that point on a semi-regular basis, right? So if he empties his hand of all value, he really loses his ability to stretch out the game, because the next board's going to come down, Leta's going to top deck a Libram, and then what do you really do about that? So I liked the idea that Leta had, that he readjusted there to just trying to set up for a slightly longer game against RDU, but in the end, obviously, that second Nag Grand Slam was brutal. I hadn't accounted for it being just immediately lethal, obviously, but as I said, I think any plan that Leta was going to formulate involved that one remaining 10-mana card being Survival of the Fittest and not Nag Grand Slam, because that was going to prove to be pretty much impossible to beat, regardless of whether it killed him that turn or not.
And although Leta did just lose the game, he is now on a pretty strong responsive time, right? He has the Weapon Rogue to go up against this mage here from RDU, which is a pretty good matchup. And even after that, he does have that Rush Warrior that we've seen have a lot of success over this weekend as well. So even though he's 0-1 down, it's not looking too bad, I think, because this is an expected win, I would say, for the Rogue.
It is, yes, but I still think from that point, RDU is not in that bad a position. He does have counter Qs to run into this. There's some series that we've seen where when the Weapon Rogue counter Q comes in, it then has the opportunity to just completely run away with the series. I don't think this is necessarily one of those. And there's still good builds on RDU's side to be able to combat that, but we have seen that, you know, that sweet potential is still there, and we've seen it from Leta in particular with his build, with the extra consistency of the weapon. And those matchups he's going to be playing against, which if he wins this mage, it will then be the Rogue and the Rush Warrior left remaining for RDU, the Miracle Rogue and the Rush Warrior for RDU. Those are two matchups, again, where you don't necessarily need Swine Tusk Shank to do all the damage that you need. You can get there with a self-sharpening sword, so that extra weapon consistency from Leta might just come into play yet again in this series.
Yeah, and it's just going to be an interesting one. It's I feel like I've gained some level of love for Weapon Rogue just based on what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, and I don't know why, because it's not normally my style of deck historically when we've had other versions of Weapon Rogue and such, but it's just something I think I more respect just the bring itself, you know what I mean, and how it's slotted into the meta. I think that's why I like it right now, because it's just clever. But here we are going to kick it into game number 2. RDU getting that Incanter's Flow and a pretty flexible opening as well with double Rune Orb and a nice smattering of minions.
Yeah, isn't Kingsbane Rogue like your most hated Hearthstone deck of all time?
With outside getting angry already.
Outside of like maybe Res Priest, I guess.
Yeah, those two. That's all I've got to say.
Yeah. I officially know you too well, Raven. We've reached that point.
It's been too long, Sol. It's been too long.
I shouldn't know you. Why do I know you?
Should we just stop this now?
Okay.
we just done it. Done it.
Bye, folks. We've reached the end. This is the longest I can tolerate a friendship for. It's an end.
Oh, you said friendship.
Oh no, exposed. I mean, I hate you. You suck.
Oh, there we go. I feel better now.
Yeah.
Here, though, Leta has not got access to either of his 4 weapons of choice in the list here, so just doing it the old-fashioned way with a hero power and a deadly poison instead.
You may have noticed we paid 0 attention to the Incanter's Flow that RDU drew and played in the early game, because that's just a given in RDU's games of Mage. It's not even worth talking about.
I do think he's got one of those hands that can actually set up a decent race against Leta here.
Yes.
Again, the Wormweaver, pretty good. Wow, now the Apexis Blast, not too bad at all. These Rune Orbs can keep control of the early game best he can.
Yeah, completely agree. The stars have aligned here for RDU, where not only has he got a nice start with the flow, but I was about to say Leta does not have the potential to race himself. But, well, that's going to change very rapidly now with Swine Tusk Shank picked up on curve. I think it's
and this is
down.
Yeah. I think the swing makes sense. The problem is, of course, you could say, oh no, just wait with the Shank, it'll be fine. But it's not so much the fact that he has nothing else to do, it's just that the paying 3 mana in following turns just feels too slow, right?
Shield Maiden.
Quick, get Shadow Step.
My kingdom for a Shadow Step, yeah. Yep. Juice it up, go to town. Nothing really doing about these minions on board just yet. You'll have to deal with them later if it comes down to it. But RDU, as you mentioned, has a great hand here for setting up this race. He can now fire more damage off with the Rune Orbs. He can look to pick up a mask either from his deck with the Refreshing Spring Water or from those Rune Orbs themselves. But actually now, potential for Wormweaver even. Picks up a 0 mana card here. It's worth thinking about. Play the Wormweaver and potentially brain freeze his own Babbling Book. Just to really front load a bunch of damage.
Yeah, that Worm Weaver really is just the card I looked at when I talked about that sort of anti or racing Leta back, right? Because Leta, you can't just leave Mana Worms sitting around, and as we can see, at least for now, Leta does not have answers to these minions. And now there's what, at least double Runed Orb plus X next turn to buff these Mana Worms?
Yeah, that's right. Paralytic Poison here, at least, is free alongside the Cutting Class. There's a Silver Leaf on this, though, right? So you could have attacked first for mana considerations, but attacking last is better for damage considerations, right? Because you can get more poisons to deal more damage, but obviously getting more poisons before the Cutting Class can potentially save you a mana that turn if you don't have to pay 1 for the Cutting Class. Kind of an interesting decision point. No cloak.
So yeah. There's currently 12 for Leta with all the damage he has access to for next turn.
Yep.
So many options.
Plus the draws.
Has the Wicked Stab, goes for the face, and that's just going to be game, right? Fireball's going to be too much.
Yep.
Wow.
Cloak of Shadows that turn.
Yeah, and things would have looked a lot different because, as we can see, there's no mask in RDU's hand, not even necessarily for next turn, but even back-to-back cloak, right? You would still have to find the mask to actually catch up on the damage, but that was just enough here, and RDU just sort of strolls to a relatively easy second victory there, which means he's only got one more deck left to try and beat. And again, it's when I've talked about so much over the past 2 weeks, I guess, with players who aren't bringing Mage. I get there are different ways to build lineups, you know, and they're very interesting, but Mage just for me has that X factor for a last hero standing tournament like this.
Yeah, and by X factor you mean flow on 2 into blast on 4, right? Through that all things are possible.
It's true.
Yeah, I'm not joking. That is literally the X factor of the deck. You know, that is kind of baked into the win rate, where a certain percentage of games you do just draw that early flow, and then even the bad matchups become winnable if you're able to follow that up as effectively as possible. And as effectively as possible pretty much describes directly racing your opponent with a Pex's Blast on 4, because most of the bad matchups for you are straight up aggro decks like Face Hunter and Weapon Rogue, which are going to be hunting you down with extreme efficiency. So now, having Leta pushed off that Weapon Rogue has been extremely successful throughout the European region at dealing with that exact situation, but it has fallen short here, and now that leaves Leta in a miserable spot where his only remaining deck to even prevent the Mage 3-0 sweep is an unfavorable with the Rush Warrior.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and even if he wins this, at worst he has a Mirror, and then he has Miracle Rogue to beat, right? Which again, just they're just not matchups you want. It's doable, of course, but it's just not looking too good for Leta right now. But we have seen Rush Warrior clear before, so you might just need a little bit of help here in maybe getting more of those super opening hands like we saw. Was it Leta yesterday? It wasn't, right? When we saw like just the Rakara and the double bumper cars just land and start going.
No, Leta had the game where he like landed the Rakara against Priest, and then it just went unanswered for the entire game, and he just was beefing up his entire board to like 5-10s and 6-11s and so on. But yeah, I mean, I think this first match now against the Mage is going to be the really important one, right? Because I do think this is Mage favored, and I do think it's RDU Mage favored, because every matchup is RDU Mage favored. You just really struggle to beat the deck when it draws the cards in exactly the right order every game. But if he's able to get through this one, then he does have a mirror match, as you said, but there is still that Rogue, which is probably the best matchup in the metagame for Rush Warrior overall. So if he can get through the Mage, suddenly the series goes from borderline unwinnable to having, you know, somewhere in the region of, you know, 30% chance to get out of it, because he has a one favorable and one mirror match to win from that point.
Right. Well, here we are, RDU already going off of that Font of Power and getting pretty reasonable minions, actually. The Phoenix, you could argue, is still good, actually, just looking at the Cram Session in hand. But just having Observer as well is pretty nice, a solid size minion, and Leta will want to be building a board of his own, so its eventual effect after its Dormant goes off is going to be pretty impactful too.
Indeed. But no flow this time around for RDU. So he's going to have to do things just a little bit differently. But he does still have that Lunacy game plan available, and as you were saying, a nice curve of minions to lead up to that point.
Double stage dive now corrupted in Leta's hand, but Leta having a bit of a slow opening himself. Maybe these stage dives can help.
I'm not too young to fight.
Was that the flow? Oh my goodness. Okay.
I think
well, that makes life interesting.
It does, because I think he has to devolve in missiles, right? Or I guess to round out properly, he has to deal with this Rakara.
Nah.
Oh, okay.
You just believe.
Oh my, insane.
See, you were approaching that turn from a position of being Alexander Raven Baguli, and what you should have done is approach that.
You know how to say my second name, and it's not that. Don't go all TJ on me and just make up how to say it.
Alexander Raven Baguli. And then what you should have done is approached it from a position of being RDU, you see. Yeah. RDU always draws the brain freeze there.
Maybe that's where I've just been going wrong in life, so should I just pretend every situation, it's like, what would RDU do? What would happen to RDU?
You just get a bracelet.
So many
WWRDUD.
I'm lost. Stage dive into bumper car, can clear off this Phoenix and let the how do you call it, Tiny Fin, then let the Crab Rider go face. Should be okay with the small trades though, surprising.
Now for RDU, this could be the free turn he's been waiting for to really decide what his route through this game is going to be. Obviously now he played that one flow on the previous turn, which changes the makeup of his Lunacy deck, but he is going to end up going for it anyway. And I think with the amount of Refreshing Spring Water he already has in hand, that is a big plus point for it. However, he does already have one of his 7 mana cards with the Mask of Cthulhu in his hand, which does, you know, weaken the overall power level of his deck. But again, interesting decision from RDU, and again worth mentioning that he's only recently converted to putting that deck of Lunacy back in his deck, and we've already now seen him rely on it twice in 2 of the games out of the 3 that he's played so far with this mage.
Yeah, and an interesting play that the previous bumper car I mentioned about Leta using the small one did of course get him the Dark Moon Riders in hand, which then if he was expecting to run Thack this turn, he basically gains just extra buffs, right? And now the fireworks.
Yeah, this turn very much capable of going anywhere.
Not necessarily for this turn, but Cycle of Hatred against Warrior is not bad.
Yes, that is a potential game ender. You are generally looking for as many of those as possible in your deck, and that is certainly one of them.
Also, even meta, right, is pretty good. It's without silly levels of conditioning, you are killing off a minion a turn if you don't want to use it to go aggressive.
Yep. I also find it pretty interesting that RDU chose to deny the 1/1 tokens there, the Dark Moon Riders, by going with Devolving Missiles, because honestly, unless they get enormous, every Dark Moon Rider that Leta has is a potential 3/3 board swing. For RDU with the Cycle of Hatred. So I do think Devolving Missiles is, you know, absolute premium card, and obviously you're not getting any more of them from this point unless you find it from that Runed Orb that he has remaining.
Or this.
Good point. I had not considered this one. Good call.
I like it. Like, even though Brain Freeze good card, well, Devolving Missiles normally does more, right? So you just tried to commencement the run back there.
What does that even mean?
It just looked like he hovered it. Like it was, what's the card that you can get confused with? Coerce.
Oh, I see.
Leta just saying, you know what? It's time. Just coin out the biggest minion, go, hope for the best. Kind of rough when there's a 4-5 on the board.
Okay. Less okay.
What if he just double, like, 4s here, so Fireball? Oh no, he's got Demonic Blast. Yeah, sorry, he doesn't need to Fireball. But yes, this is what I was aiming at. I just forgot about his hero power. So yeah,
exactly.
and now he can Cycle of Hatred, right?
Yeah, he had a bunch of ways to set this up. I was also looking at doing this with Apotheosis, so you just bump in, but you can do it after the fact. You could have, essentially you could do this, be -1 card, and that, sorry, be +1 card in hand, and that 6/5 lifesteal would just be a 3/3 instead, which I think is fine, but obviously this is the most aggressive thing that you can do this turn, which is never going to be far from wrong in this situation. RDU has opportunity to get his own big old pile of Dark Moon Riders in his hand, just random ones with no card text.
I think what he was doing there was just staring at his hand and working out if he spends this, then this happens. If he does that, then that happens. Because with Potion of Illusion, Backfire, and the Font of Power, that's a lot of hand space he will not have very soon, right? So I think he's just doing some planning, trying to sort the future.
I almost feel like what he should have done that turn is started Potion of Illusion and just got the Key Warden back. Because it's just a useful card to have for later on, and Potion of Illusion is very rarely going to do anything super impactful for you this game, and then not had to worry too much about the hand size at the end.
Yeah, I can see that. Already, Adi, you can clean up this board if you want, and remember the rule, guys. If Playmaker lives, the Warrior wins the game.
Wait, is that the rule? I wasn't aware of this rule.
It's a rule I made up.
Oh, okay.
It's normally true, though. I'd say that it's got at least a 50% chance of being right.
Yeah. Not quite sure if it approaches high main rule levels of consistency, but probably.
Will anything, whether that rule was correct or not?
No.
I think that rule just jumps straight into legend level.
Exactly. Makes room for the sprint.
Adu's just got 4 cards left in his deck.
Yep.
Why?
Sure does. Because he's drawn 26 of them, Raven.
Oh, thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
There's just nothing going on, nothing to do there, and Leta concedes, and RDU takes a 3-0 sweep with the Spell Mage, and going to book his spot in the finals as well. And again, like, I think it's going to be the theme of the day, and for very different reasons though, but what like a strange series, right? And it does look to me that the deck of Lunacy just seems worth it, at least based on what I've seen this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's very on brand for you to just kind of, flip-flop based on the most recent game that you've seen, right? Like, I think that is very much the Raven.
Oh, I've let the whole week convince me. Come on.
Okay. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm only recently converted as well, so it's not like I get to be smug in this position. I was certainly arguing against it for a couple of weeks, but, was converted, somewhere between last week and this week when I went back to ladder and started jamming some